What's up, everybody? Laura Sanko here with Dean Thomas, the professor, the master of MMA knowledge. We are always so honored to have him join this channel for the breakdowns. Dean, I appreciate you always. I feel like I haven't seen you in a minute, though.
It's been a minute. We haven't done a show in a while. I mean, I guess
Since the last pay-per-view.
the last pay-per-view. No, but it has been a minute because it's the holiday season and events slow down, so we don't really get a chance to kick it like we normally do.
Yes, exactly. But this one coming up, let me tell you what, UFC 296 in Las Vegas. We're ending the year on a banger. Let me put it that way. This entire card, and listen, I get it. Dean and I work for the UFC. We say this a lot, like amazing card. This time, and I mean it a lot, but this time I really, really mean it because this card is absolutely bananas. And I know we're just going to talk about the main event in this video. We'll have another video on the co-main event, but like truly, this is an unbelievable card top to bottom.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable card. They just made it better with the announcement of Bryce Mitchell stepping in. Yeah. I said, man, the press conference just got better, but I don't know if he's actually going to partake in that. But if he does, the press conference just got better.
The whole thing. I honestly think you could sell tickets to that press conference and they would move. They would move.
Yeah. I love this card. I mean, what a way to go out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's start at the top if we can. We've got a title fight on our hands between Leon Edwards and Colby Chaos Covington. It's the second title defense for Leon Edwards. Of course, he won the title off Kamaru 2 fights ago with that sensational head kick knockout. Went back immediately and beat Kamaru Usman again. So I guess just to jump right into it, the most obvious question I think off the top of my head is how much is Kamaru a one-to-one comparison to Colby? Like what percent are they 90% alike? Are they 100% alike? Are they 50% alike? Like how do you break that down? How close are they to each other, I guess?
Well, if you watch their fight with Usman and Colby, you can see how similar they are to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the reason why it was so close, because they kind of negated each other's strengths. It came down to fighting inside the pocket and just a couple of wrestling exchanges, which neither of them were willing to fully commit to because they realized it wasn't worth the squeeze, right? The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. So they're very similar, but I think they're very similar, but the approach to fighting Leon might be different though. So that's the caveat in all this. The approach to fighting Leon might be a little different. I'm curious as to see how Colby comes out because he hasn't been fighting for a while. I think that's the big question here. What does Colby look like now after taking so much time off? It could help him if he let his brain rest a little bit, worked on some different skills. Colby's a very confident athlete. The break could help him. However, we don't know yet. We just don't know.
We don't know yet. We absolutely don't know yet. But what we do know is some stats because they were emailed to me.
This is my favorite part when you run them stats down because I'll be like, God damn.
It makes me sound real smart, but really I'm just reading an email. But you know what? That's the benefit of watching a channel from someone who works from the UFC. So there you go. So let's see here. Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington. Leon Edwards, 13-2. That's just in the UFC. Colby Covington, 12-3 in the UFC. So pretty similar UFC records, really. Leon, a couple inches taller, of course. Southpaw for Leon versus orthodox to Colby, although Colby switches his stance a lot. 32 years old versus 35 years old for Colby Covington. I don't think I realized that he was quite that old. I had him more at like 32 as well. Not that's a massive difference, but then when you get into the striking statistics, it gets pretty interesting. In terms of accuracy, Leon Edwards' striking accuracy is really something special. 53.4%, which is pretty darn high, to Colby Covington's 39.1%, which is a little below average, to be honest with you, but it really speaks to the role that it plays in his overall game. And in other words, maybe it's a little bit more of a means to an end than it is for other people. Strikes landed per minute, 2.8 for Leon, 4.1 for Colby, which is pretty darn high. And then you move down to takedown average per minute, 1.26 for Leon Edwards, which is not anything to sniff at, honestly. And then you got 4.05 for Colby, which is quite high, of course. Takedown defense, 69.2% for Leon, pretty darn high, and 72% for Colby. So really their overall takedown defense, statistically speaking, is not all that different. Knockdowns. Leon Edwards has 5 knockdowns as opposed to being knocked down himself once, and it flips for Colby. So Colby only has 1 knockdown, and he's been knocked down 4 times in the UFC. I thought this one was really interesting, actually, because I didn't think it would be this high for Leon. Colby has attempted 67 takedowns and landed, or excuse me, yeah, he has landed 67 takedowns in the UFC. That didn't surprise me, but Leon has landed 22, which is a little like that's a good click higher than in my mind I thought it would be. Of course, I know he's very well-rounded, but you think of him as a striker, so it's interesting to see the math on the page. And then I think I touched on takedown defense earlier, but just some interesting tidbits to keep in mind there. To your point that you were talking about a second ago, though, in terms of Colby and like what the time off may or may not need, it's an interesting one because normally we look at inactivity as a negative thing. And I understand why we do that. And I'm kind of with you. Like, I don't necessarily know that it's 100% negative for Colby because, first of all, it's just kind of how he's been doing it for a while now. So it's sort of something he's used to. I don't know that we could point to a situation where we were like, oh man, he came off a long layoff and he looked really off. I can't think of an instance like that. And, he really, to some degree, has saved himself a lot of wear and tear in a style of fighting that isn't necessarily tough on his brain. He doesn't take a lot of shots, but like we've seen from Kamaru, it can be really tough on the body. The life of a wrestler, especially as young as they start, by the time you hit your mid-30s, it really starts to catch up with you. So I think Colby might be benefiting a little bit from this. Possibly.
I think so. I think this could benefit him because it saved him 2 years of damage, saved him 2 years of stress. Now, obviously, we could talk about the incident at the steakhouse with Jorge Masvidal and so on and so forth. But, I mean, Colby's been chilling.
You're trying to make this video messy, Dean.
No, I'm not listen, I don't want no smoke. Come on, Sanko. I don't want that beef. But the reality is that if Colby has been getting better on the off time, he could come back better. That's the key. He has to have still been working while he's been off. If he's still been working while he's been off, improving some things, working on some things, working on his striking, getting his movement back. Now, that's the one thing that we've seen from Colby that has kind of slowed down. And maybe we attributed that to, his fight with Kamaru Usman, but it was also the same with Masvidal. He didn't have the typical movement like he normally had, like he had against Robbie Lawler, which was 4 years ago, or Dos Anjos, which was 5 or 6 years ago. That's when he was moving a lot. He was really busy, really active. But when we saw when he fought Kamaru Usman and even Jorge Masvidal, he slowed down a bit. So I'm wondering if he comes back a better fighter with the volume that he used to have, or is he going to have this same slow tempo pace, and which is going to leave him very vulnerable to a guy like Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards will pick him apart if he fights slow like he did against Masvidal.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I wonder if, because of the familiarity as well, if I'm sure he took Jorge as seriously as he should and needed to, but Leon Edwards is a different beast on the feet than Jorge. Jorge's a dangerous guy, but Leon Edwards has a really diverse skill set, and range management, I think, is one of his biggest skill sets. Yeah, it's interesting to think about. You make a really good point in terms of like the pace of his fights, because when I went back and watched a bunch of his fights today, and you're right, the pace has always been a major weapon. And while I do think he still has extraordinary cardio, maybe you got a bell curve of guys that have extraordinary pace. Maybe he's not such an outlier anymore. Still on the edge of the.
What he manages curve, it. He might manage it a little bit better now because he might feel he has to.
Yeah.
when you start pushing 35, 36, I mean, he'll be 36 in February. You
Mm-hmm.
start getting a little older, you have to manage it a little better. Now, I will say this, not only does he manage it very well, but he also has a certain amount of control in which you don't know which intensity he's bringing on in any moment, which makes him a difficult fighter to fight, which makes him very tricky because
Mm-hmm.
he'll drop his head, then come up with hard punches. He'll drop his head, come up with softer punches. He'll drop his head and shoot hard. He'll drop his head, shoot slow. So he does all these different things, and you just don't know which intensity he's going to bring, and you have to respect it all. And he's a master at that. I think that's one of his strongest skill sets, is being able to disguise his intensity.
Yeah. I went back and I looked at the scoring as well in every fight. So Damian Maia on, and obviously you got to take out the losses. So I'm talking about every other fight since Damian Maia, other than the Kamaru Usman fights. He's lost 2 rounds the whole time, and they both were to Rafael dos Anjos. And I wonder if there are not some things, because I was trying to figure out like who is the closest comp to Leon that Colby has already fought. And there aren't necessarily.
There's nothing.
There's nothing. And
There's nothing.
RDA was as close as I could get, and it's not a very good one still.
Yeah, there's nothing. You want me to tell you what the closest is?
Yeah.
And I've been saving this nugget just for you.
I love nuggets.
Way back in the day, before these guys were big names, Colby Covington fought a guy named Jason Jackson.
Okay.
And
I know the name.
Jason Jackson, the Bellator welterweight champion.
Ah.
And he dropped Colby with a head kick.
Huh.
Just the athleticism. And that to me is probably the closest that I've seen to a good striker that Colby has faced. The one guy who actually got to him. He dropped him with a head kick. Colby turned around and ended up winning the fight, just doing his thing. But
did Jason Jackson have wrestling like Leon does?
No, he doesn't. But this was like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like the only data that we have.
Yeah.
To say that Leon that Colby has faced a decent athletic striker. And that's what gets like he's a decent, not a decent, he's a great world-class MMA striker with good takedown defense. And he's young.
Yeah. And pretty damn good takedown offense as well. That was the thing that I don't always immediately attribute to Leon. And when you look at the stats, it's pretty unfair, honestly. It's not the cornerstone of his game, but it's there. And he is, according to the piece of paper, the only person to have taken Kamaru down in the history of the welterweight division.
And mounted him.
What's that?
And mounted him.
Yes, and exactly.
Mount?
Beat, I can't remember even overhook or underhook, but he beat the position because Kamaru was wise to it. He tried so hard to reverse the position as he was getting taken down. But Leon Edwards is enough of a grappler where he read all of those movements in real time and ended up, like you say, in mount. So pretty crazy moment to see that happen. And it was a beautiful outside trip. I mean, textbook stuff. So the man knows what he's doing. I did another little fun exercise that you're gonna have to bear with me while I read some of these, but I just thought this was so cool because obviously Leon Edwards has this long journey to his title opportunity. Where we sit right now, he is 12 fights unbeaten. So that he would have been, 10 fights unbeaten coming into the fight with Kamaru, if I remember correctly. But there was not a performance that really allowed us to see his greatness in its totality because he had the weird thing with Bilal, and then the Nate fight was kind of weird in its own way where it was really great and then it kind of wasn't. It made you go, ugh, at the end there. What really, I think, encapsulates how amazing he is as a fighter is the difference between his second fight with Kamaru and his third fight with Kamaru. And when you go back and look at the numbers, it is wild. It is absolutely wild. And I'll read you some of them. So the second time they fought, now I'm talking about the first title fight because sometimes people forget that there was there was a first one. So we're talking about the first title fight, but the second time that they ever fought. In the second time, Kamaru landed 5 of 12 takedowns. So pretty good clip there and got 10 minutes and 36 seconds of ground control. or control time, I should say. I don't know if it was all ground, but he had 10 minutes of 30 and 36 seconds of control time in general. Leon was 61% for significant strikes landed, and Leon landed 13 of 13 leg kicks. Kamaru had landed 73% of his significant strikes and was 5 for 5 on his kicks. And then was like 22 of 28 on ground strikes. So really good fight for Kamaru. You go to the third one. This is crazy. Kamaru only lands 4 of 15 takedowns. He only gets 5 minutes of control, 5 minutes and 3 seconds of control. This time, Leon landed 74% of his significant strikes, 50 of 53 leg kicks. Kamaru went from 73% significant strike accuracy to 42. That's crazy. And Kamaru only landed 6 of 8 leg kicks and got 1 ground strike. To me, I mean, when you go from landing 13 or throwing and landing 13 leg kicks, and then all of a sudden you decide to throw 53 leg kicks, that was the game plan. And man, did it ever work.
And
man, did it ever work.
That. I remember he was extremely active with those leg kicks.
Oh,
you know, and I think that's because he knew that Usman, again, remember how I was saying it earlier, we talked about the differences between Usman and Colby. Well, the way Leon's going to fight them will probably be a little different too. I don't expect him to throw a lot of leg kicks against Colby because Colby will crash in on him. And I think he threw a lot of leg kicks on Usman because Usman is notorious for bad knees. Yeah, he's got, he just doesn't move that well. And I think Colby may be able to deal with that a little bit better. But here's the thing with Leon, and you spoke on this a second ago about the Nate Diaz fight. Leon does have focus problems. In the end of fights, he loses focus. And this is something I noticed about him. If you go back and watch the Gunnar Nelson fight, dominates the first 2 rounds. What happens in the last round, right before the end? He gets taken down and mounted. The Nate Diaz fight, dominates the fight. 10-7s for every round. And then the last minute of the fight, he gets punched in the face. Brian Barberena, same thing. Dominates the fight. Last seconds of the fight, gets punched in the face and dropped. He has focus issues when it comes to fights in terms of being able to close the deal. Now, if he fights Colby like that, and Colby might know that about him, if he fights Colby like that, Colby can run away with this. Now, on paper, Leon is the much better fighter. On paper, like the numbers, you just ran off these numbers. His numbers are staggering. On paper, Leon should win this fight easily. However, if Colby gets to him mentally, he can run away with this.
Well, and he's a momentum fighter.
Yes.
Whereas what you just described, it's almost the opposite of a momentum fighter, right? A guy that has momentum, but for some reason can't close the deal, as you say.
He loses it. For whatever reason, he kind of falls apart. Maybe it's because he didn't get rid of them and they're still there, and it makes him a little nervous and makes him panic a little bit. But for whatever reason, he tends to fall apart. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen in this fight. Maybe beating Kamaru Usman may have given him confidence.
I was going to say, because what you're describing was exactly what was happening, although probably more so the fight never really, other than the first round, and then it went downhill. But that idea of like, pull yourself together, son, like what his corner was saying to him. I wonder if that is something that you can overcome in one spectacular moment with one incredible head kick and be forever like, that's never going to happen again.
Yeah, I mean, why couldn't you?
Yeah.
Why couldn't you? Like sometimes there's these miraculous events that happen in your life that just changes everything. And why can't that be one of them? Why can't that be the wake-up call for him? That could be it. But I do know that in the past, and the records show it, you can go back and watch the fights. The records will show that he's had focus problems. However, the fact that he did beat Kamaru Usman twice after the first time, getting dominated and coming back with that head kick, and then the second time completely dominating the fight, he may have been able to overcome it. But if he hasn't, Colby is not the guy to fight.
Yeah, Colby, you give him an inch, he'll take 10 miles, because the momentum builds and it builds on itself, and it's sort of this exponential factor of confidence and volume and pace and whatever the opposite of a negative spiral would be. It's everything just sort of builds upon itself, and it grows like a mushroom in terms of, him controlling moments in a fight. He doesn't have a lot of like fights that go
No,
like this.
no. I mean, and I admire that about him. You know, I'm not a fan of him personally, but I admire that about him is that, and this is something that I always try to tell my fighters: if you win the first round, it should only get worse for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like how is it getting better? Like, because in the first round is like what you guys are made of. Now, typically, when you start having these ebbs and flows in the fight, that's because the one who was winning let off the gas. They took their foot off.
Exactly. And
Colby doesn't do that.
do you think that that is because I'll tell you what I think. I think that mental toughness and cardio are very linked. You cannot be mentally tough and not, well, I mean, I guess you could, but like it's not going to be able to express itself if you don't have the cardio to back it up. Because, and I think that's what has allowed Colby to have these just downhill only type of fights, because he knows that he can do this without a shadow of a doubt for as long as he possibly needs to. And as many fighters will stand there and say, best camp of my life, I train harder than I ever have. When you get to that moment where your body betrays you and you can't make the decisions you wish you could be making in that moment, is the worst feeling ever. We've talked about this before.
Well, if you look at some of Colby's fights, watch his body language and his posture in some of those exchanges. It's not very intense.
Mm-hmm.
And what he's doing is he's wearing on his opponent, knowing that his opponent is going to wear out before he will. Because he's not, and that's what I'm saying about him managing his energy and being able to dictate and control how much intensity he's putting out. Because what he'll do sometimes, he'll just like lay on him like a blanket and just lock his hands and just ride and lock his hands and move a little bit and put his weight this way a little bit. And the other guy's working really hard and really expending their energy and their muscles. And then Colby now when they're tired, he senses that, then he just turns it on. Mm-hmm. Then he can turn it on, and then he'll blanket a little bit and just ride and ride and ride, and then he'll turn it on. And he's brilliant at that. It's going to be tough, but again, it's going to be tough to do that to a guy like Leon who has the potential to snipe you.
To that end, and I really don't think I haven't settled on an answer for this yet, but it's a question I have about other people stylistically too. Does Colby's style make it inherently harder for him to win on the judges' scorecards because he will have those moments, like you said, where he's winning because he's controlling and he's wearing the other guy down, but he's not really scoring. And so you can imagine these rounds where maybe Colby gets Leon down and he's just like wearing on him, maybe, a couple short shots, but Colby doesn't always unleash with like some insane barrage of ground and pound. It's more of a constant drowning pressure with smaller shots. So you can imagine a round where maybe there's, 3.5 minutes of that. And then somehow Leon gets back up and lands a couple of good shots, and you and I know, how do you score that round?
Yeah, he could. Like Leon could win rounds that way. But again, Leon's going to have to be mentally tough enough to deal with that type of pressure. Mm-hmm. Like he's going to have to be mentally stronger than he's ever been, because Colby is I'd probably say the mentally strongest guy he's ever faced, probably at this point, mm-hmm. between him and Usman. But I mean, as we saw in Usman's last fight, he didn't seem, when he fought Leon in the last time, he obviously wasn't as mentally tough as we normally see him. But Colby will be coming in, especially after this layoff, he will be mentally strong.
What do you think is the most special part of Colby's game?
Again, his ability to manage his energy the way he does and disguise it in moments. Yeah. And just really read his opponent. Like he's such a good reader of his opponent. Like he'll take bad shots, his head will be down, and he'll just be hanging out. I mean, almost kind of Ben Askren-esque. Then he'll get
that's a good. I know what you're talking about, where he puts his head between the legs and like almost has the bad, like his back is bowed.
Yeah.
And he'll stay there for a minute.
Yeah, he'll stay there for a minute. And he's not really wasting a lot of energy. Like if you look at his body, he's not really squeezing anything. He's just kind of pushing in. He's just kind of leaning on his opponent. And we look at that as like, oh my God, this guy's cardio, but he's not really doing much. And he'll do that a lot in fights where he's just holding on. Like his grip strength will last the whole fight. He'll just hold on to you and just kind of move his weight around, but he's not really doing much. So Leon's got to get him to fight. Leon's got to get him to work and get him to use his muscles, because if not, he can lay on Leon the whole time, because Colby is so good at that.
Yeah. How does Leon, you know, I guess, I mean, yeah, how does Leon win this fight? Like, what would you, if you're going to corner him and give him some advice, like what are some of the big things that he needs to do or not do?
He has to. Well, here's the thing: if Colby's going to fight him the way he fought Masvidal and these other guys, and that's just standing in front of you and like ducking his head and throwing wild punches, Leon should be able to pick him apart easily. I think a lot of body kicks, a lot of straight up body kicks to the middle should be able to affect Colby, and just chopping him down from the waist up. Mm-hmm. Not even at the legs, but from the waist up, like hitting the body. And that was one thing that Kamaru Usman did in his first fight against Colby, was he kicked a lot to the body. And I think that's going to work for Leon, because Leon's faster, he's longer, and he's got much more better balance than Kamaru Usman. Sometimes we give Kamaru Usman, at that time when he fought Colby, we gave him a lot of credit. Because Usman now looks pretty good. He knocked out Masvidal. But at that time when he fought Colby, Usman was pretty sloppy. His balance was bad. He's falling over his feet half the time. Leon ain't that type of striker.
Mm-hmm.
Leon is a English pit bull.
He's about as technically perfect as you will see.
Yeah.
Honestly, like when you really start to dig into the weeds, and not just that, but like, and I know people post their best stuff to Instagram, but you just, even just B-roll of him hitting pads, it's like, it's alarmingly perfect.
What did you, and I have to refer to this, did you ever see that video where he was elbowing the pads?
I've seen him elbow pads, but I don't know if I know which.
And he's elbowing the pads.
Oh, yes.
And I said, oh my God.
Yeah.
I was like, it was the scariest.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about now.
Right? Where he's just going, and I'm like, who's going to beat this man?
Yeah. Well, and that's another, you bring up a really good point, because I feel like that's a part of Leon's game that is really underrated, is his clinch game. His elbow game specifically
I'm telling
is
you right
nasty.
Now.
It's nasty.
Yes, and that's going to be problematic for Colby. If Colby can't get down to his legs, if Leon forces him to stay upright and starts to work the clinch, in which Leon is really good at. I mean, if you go back to that Gunnar Nelson fight, those first 2 rounds, his clinch work, I stole a lot of his stuff. I was like, yo, write that down. Put that in the toolbox. But Leon, his clinch game is nasty. And if he gets that working, he is going to slump Colby if he gets his clinch game working.
It really adds a layer of complexity for Colby to try to figure out how to close the distance safely, because, it's always nice to have a plan B when you're looking to wrestle. You like to think that you could wrestle to the body or to the legs, but it seems like a much safer path is going to be for him to only wrestle to the legs, which takes away, some options.
Now you still got to get past the knees.
The knees, exactly.
Of a long southpaw. So
yeah.
I mean, he's got his work cut out for him. Like, he can't just stand in front of Leon. I mean, he really does have his work cut out for him.
Yeah.
In terms of his safety. Like, he's got a lot of things that he has to do in order to stay safe, to implement that game plan, to get it into the later rounds.
Yeah.
Because he's got to stay safe.
Leon's a big guy too. Like, I think they're only 3 inches on paper, but Leon's a big dude for welterweight. Yeah. Have you stood next to him? Of course you have. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's tall and he's long. Yeah. He's a good fighter. And there's something about the way the English train that I really appreciate. And I might have told you this before, but somebody said this once to me. They said the fighters in America are better, the athletes are better, but the coaching in England is better. And I said, you might be right. I mean, they're just, because they're so far away and they are not in the proximity that we have to information, they seem to think outside of the box a little bit better. And
you think it's attention to detail?
Yeah, and they have more attention to detail, and they seem to be a little more creative. And I can appreciate that from those guys.
I like that. That's an interesting take. I'm going to file that one away. Can I ask you for a pick?
Yeah, I think Leon will slump him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think he makes it look relatively, I don't want me to use the word easy, but will it be a pretty clear cut, like knockout type of win you're envisioning, or?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I think he stops him.
Yeah.
I think he stops him probably within 3. He's going to have to. I think if it goes past that, I just don't know if Leon will be able to bounce back like he did against Usman in the second fight. But I think that Leon has the skills to stop Colby within 3 rounds, and I think that does happen on Saturday night.
Do you think Leon might be the best UK fighter that we've ever seen, or do you still give that to Tom Aspinall? Or is it? I guess it's probably unknown.
I mean, it's relative, right, to their weight classes.
Yeah,
I mean, it's easier for Tom to be the best.
That's true.
Heavyweight, but in terms, Tom is still the best. Tom is the best UK fighter from the UK.
It's pretty cool though to have them both be living in the same moment when the UK has been kind of dying for another big star to come along after Michael Bisping retired. So it's good.
Man, it was like Ian Freeman, Michael Bisping, and then now we got these two.
Yeah, it's a good time to be a Brit for sure. Well, it's going to be a good fight. I'm excited for this one. I think it could go one of two ways, and it's not going to be going anywhere in the middle, in my opinion. I think it's going to be either all Leon or all Colby, and not a whole lot of either anything in the middle.
Well, if we learned anything from MMA, it's never what we expect.
True.
And with that being said, Colby will probably duck his head, fake a shot, come up, and knock Leon out. Yep. And I will not be surprised.
And that is
MMA.
the year, that is the 2 years that we have been living in, is the truth. So
always the unexpected.
Always the unexpected, but that's why we love this sport so much. And that's why we appreciate you, Dean Thomas, bringing your knowledge to the channel. I thank you.
Thank you.
Last main event of the year. I know.
It's amazing.
Are you gonna still gonna have time for me in 2024?
Of course I'm gonna have time for you in 2024.
Okay,
what are you talking about? Stop playing.
That's why I asked you on camera. So you had the pressure.
Yeah. So now damn it.
So you couldn't say no.
I couldn't say no, but I have been known to say yes on camera and no when the cameras are off. So
well, I will wait your email.
No, I promise you, me and you, we are riding. We doing big things.
All right. I love it. That's perfect. Thank you so much. And guys, if you have a second, please hit like, subscribe. It helps us very, very much. Helps to grow the channel, helps me out personally, helps Dean out personally. So we appreciate you guys, and we will see you in 2024.